those of you who aren't aware, and I think probably most of you are, but the ones who are not, we're missionaries, and we're in the country of Egypt through archaeology, so we're archaeology missionaries, and use that as leverage to get into these Muslim countries. And we've been into the Muslim world since 1985, and been a lot of things happen and a lot of changes over the years, but God is still the same. He don't change. And so we're still happy that God has called us. Our primary ministry is to widows and orphans. And one of the things that we do is distribute to widows what we call a bag of hope, and I'll explain that to you. In the Islamic world, widows are not like they are here in America. In the Islamic world, if you're a widow, then it's your fault. It doesn't matter why you're a widow, it is your fault. And it's your fault because you were not a good enough wife to your husband. And so Allah took your husband away from you as punishment to you because you were not a good enough wife. That means that you are cursed. And as you are cursed, that relieves the government of any responsibility to care for you. Now, at the death of your husband, whether it was a heart attack or an automobile accident or war or whatever, it didn't matter why you became widowed, the estate that you and he collected does not belong to you as a widow. It belongs to the next male member of the family. That next male member could be a son, it could be a nephew, it could be a grandson, it could be a down-the-line cousin that you've never even met before. And it would be up to that person, that male member, to determine your fate. If they don't like you, then you're put out on the streets. If they do like you, then maybe perhaps you can still live in the same home as long as you walk the chalk line and as long as you make things pleasant for that person. But right now in the city of Cairo, Egypt, we're not talking about the whole country, just the city of Cairo. There's 2.9 million widows that are living under bridges, under stairwells, next to sewage ditches. The ones that weren't able to live in their remaining homes. When you get to, at the end of your life, you stand before Allah on the great judgment day, then you do not speak on your behalf. Your husband speaks to God on your behalf. If you don't have a husband or didn't have a husband, then your father will speak on your behalf. They are the ones that determine whether you go to paradise or go the opposite direction. And so these women have nothing. Most of them have never been trained to do anything. It's a man's society over there. The men are the ones who work, and the men are the ones who make all the decisions. And men are they are the lord of the household. And unless the husband gives his permission, the wife doesn't learn anything outside of the home. She learns how to care for the children, how to cook and clean house and so forth, but having a job on the outside, you have to get special permission from your husband to do that. And so a good majority of these women are not trained to do anything. Consequently, they have to try to get money the best way they can, however they can. Prostitution is always there in the cards, as well as other things. One particular widow that we're supporting, she was 78 years old, and her son and daughter-in-law were both killed in a car wreck, which left her with their 5 children to care for. And so they were too young to inherit anything. And so a down the line cousin took control of the estate, and then she was kicked out of the house. She was living under a bridge. And throughout the city of Cairo, they have these water pipe smoke shops every place, and the tobacco or whatever they're smoking is burned by charcoal, and the charcoal then comes from wood. Well, Cairo's in the middle of the desert. There's not a whole lot of wood available, but this widow, she would spend all night long collecting pieces of wood from in the city. And she would sell this wood to these smoke shops, and she would receive the equivalent of $5 a month. The government charged her $1 for sleeping under their bridge. And so with $4, she had to raise and feed 4 children who were below the age of 12. When we found out about this, then she became one of the first women that we began to support. And we support them with what we call a bag of hope. A bag of hope is a canvas bag about 1 meter tall, and we fill it full of rice and beans and macaroni and honey and tea and that type of thing, along with bottled water. And it's enough to feed a widow and 4 children for an entire month. And each one of our widows gets one of these a month. And of course, the bags are delivered daily, but one widow gets one each month. And so we have been, that has been our ministry to widows for at least 20, 25 years. And that is still the focal point of our ministry in Egypt today. That as well as ministry to the persecuted believers, and there's a ton of them there, and which we'll discuss a little bit later on. But if any of you feel so inclined to help our widows, we would certainly appreciate it, and they would appreciate it. That bag of hope, we have received so many testimonials, has been the one thing that prevented them and their families from total starvation. And it's such a great privilege. It was hard to start with, to kind of set the rules and so forth, and we were struggling on what type of rules and regulations we should have, and should we just give them to anybody and everybody and so forth, and whether we really should give that to Muslims or give them to someone that's not a professed Christian. And then one morning, Paula and I were reading, while we were in Egypt, we're reading the book of James. And we get to James 1:27. And James 1:27, Paula read it, and I said, stop. Read it again. She read it again. I said, read it again. So we read it again. And come to find out, James 1:27 says this: what is true religion? Pure, true religion, undefiled before God. Well, we discovered that it wasn't a ministerial society. We also discovered it wasn't these great cathedrals like you see in Europe. It wasn't the Southern Baptists. It wasn't the Assemblies of God. It wasn't the Church of God. It wasn't the newest revival center or evangelistic society. James says that true religion, undefiled before God, is this: you care for the fatherless, you care for the widows. And as we were thinking about this and praying about it and concentrating on it, we discovered some things. First of all, James said absolutely nothing about caring for Christian widows. He said nothing about caring for Jewish widows or Roman widows or Greek widows or Syrian widows. You know what he said? Widows. So that was our answer. If you're a widow, then you get a bag. The intent was not to trick these women into accepting Christ. We weren't going to try to have our own little system of blackmail. You accept Jesus, we'll give you a bag. No. That wasn't Jesus. But you know what? There's been a number of them widows. They have accepted Jesus because we give the bag in the name of Jesus. And they want to give thanks for the one who's responsible for giving them the food. And they say, please tell Isa, or Isa, which is Jesus, please tell Isa thank you. He says, we can do that. We can tell Jesus thank you on your behalf, but you could do it yourself. You can actually go to Jesus yourself and you can thank him. And they're amazed, absolutely amazed. And so even though it wasn't intended to be an evangelism tool, over the years it has evolved into that in many places. And so, well, we're still active with the Bags of Hope, but we have a little quirk different now. And fortunately, a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago, how the farm? How is it? 3 years ago? I think there was a farm that came for sale in Goshen. Now, to Texans, we call that Goshen, okay? But in Goshen, in Egyptian, Goshen in Texas, we bought this 6-acre farm, and it's when we had they're producing produce on it, and they did a good job of producing produce. They would produce about 1 ton an acre. Which is pretty good for Egyptian standards. But after we bought it, we dedicated the farm to the Lord. I walked it. I walked around it, through it, around it, and up and down it, claiming it for Christ on behalf of the widows, and claiming every seed, every plant, every produce that was produced on behalf of the widows, giving it to God. And the second year that we had it, the produce came in at about 3 tons an acre. And the last 16 years, it had averaged 1 ton an acre. Last year, it came in at 9 tons an acre. Wow. And every bit of that goes to our widows. And when they get too much, then it's harvested and sold, and all of the money goes to the widows to buy blankets and shoes and school supplies and that type of thing. And so during this pandemic, which we were not able to get over there to fund our widows through the Bags of Hope, the farm has done exceptionally well. And it's doing even greater than the 9 tons an acre now. And they're growing stuff that's never been grown before, or never been grown before there. They experimented with planting okra. They don't have okra in Egypt, but they planted okra, and they planted not a lot. It was only about a quarter of an acre, but in that quarter of an acre, it came in with 2 tons of okra. There was no water to water the farm, and so a friend of mine, he heard about the project, and he wanted to help, and he foot the bill to bring irrigation from the Nile River into the farm. So now we got free water, and it's just phenomenal what God is doing in the very midst of this pandemic. And so we've been at home more this year than the last 30 years. But God is still working, He's still moving, and we're still just excited. We want to get back over, okay? I don't wish this pandemic to last another minute, that we don't need for it to. And so we want to get back over there. But in the meantime, God is taking care of His own. And He's taking care of those that we have committed our service to. And for those of you who have not met my wife, she's in the front row, and she is the most important part of our ministry. Paula, stand up. You know, I did this. There was a couple of times I didn't think that she was going to be with me. And in fact, I'll tell you that story. I wasn't going to say that, but I'm going to do it anyway. We were delivering food out to the widows in the desert, and when you're out in the desert, you gotta go on horses or wagons. So we were on horses, and we were about probably 2.5 hours away from any civilization, because these Bedouins and the oasis and so forth, they're not like driving next door. I mean, you go a ways before you get there. And so we were riding these horses, and I went on ahead to look at a best route to go, and then her horse was spooked, and so they don't have Western saddles over there. They got English saddles, so you don't have a saddle on, and so her horse got spooked and bucked her off, and she came off of that horse, and there was a rock outcropping that she fell on with her entire right side, and so but because we were so far away, she had to get back on that horse for us to get back into town, and so she climbed back on that horse, and the little Muslim boy that was helping her, he got an earful. Because every time that she went over a little hump or around a little corner, she would say, "Oh, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." But we finally got her to a little clinic in a village, and after much, much, much pain. And this was an excellent and wonderful clinic back in Queen Victoria's day, and certainly not now. Cobwebs on the X-ray machines, and there was still blood on sheets and that type of thing. And so they looked at her, and by that time she was black from her breastbone to her backbone, and from her arm to her hip, just totally black. And they said, "You have a bad bruise." Obviously. We finally got her back to our flat, and she couldn't stand, she couldn't sit, she couldn't lay, she couldn't walk, there was nothing that without causing such severe pain. And the only way she could sleep was to kind of lean back against the wall. And that's the only way she got any type of relief to sleep at all. And she went through that for 4 days. 4 days. And finally, a doctor friend of mine, actually a pharmacist, he told me this. He says, if you care for her, you'll get her out of Egypt. And you'll do it now. So we caught the next flight to Germany, and to Frankfurt, Germany. And when we landed in Frankfurt, now they have a wonderful clinic in their in their airport. And we took her there, and they ran some tests, and come to find out, she had 8 broken ribs, she had a cracked pelvis, a blood clot, or 2 blood clots in the lungs. One of the ribs had or 2 of the ribs had actually broken and penetrated the lungs. She lost 1.5 liters of blood, and the doctor said that she would not make it through the night. So they rushed her by ambulance to the University Hospital, one of the best pulmonary hospitals in all of Europe. It just happened to be there. And so to make a long story short, through surgery and this type of thing, she survived. The next morning, she was still alive. They told me she had a 15% chance of living. Then they upped it to 20%, then 25%, and on up. And when I called our sons in America and told them what had happened, and they flew over, and when they walked in, it jumped about 50% the chances of living. But they eventually said that she would have to be on oxygen for the rest of her life. She would have to walk on a walker, and she would never be able to fly again. She'd never be able to really have a normal life, and that just needed to be prepared for that. And I was wondering, I said, with this prognosis, are we going to be able to ever get back to Egypt again? But one Thursday morning, when I went there to see her, she says, I want to get out of here. We got to get back to Egypt. I said, all right, that's it. God is doing it. God is going to continue it. And to make that long story short, she didn't spend 4 months in the hospital like they said she would. As you can see, she's not on oxygen. Since that time, she's flown at least 500,000 miles. And still ministering. And still trusting God. And she didn't go out of the hospital on a walker. She walked out. And she walked out 4 weeks later. And so God is still in the miracle working business.
Welcome to Canaan, a small indigenous community here on the west coast of Colombia. In recent years, Canaan has grown tremendously. The people here have a heart for God and for sharing His love. This is where the Cubit Foundation does their work. Over the years, Cubit has worked on developing the community in many ways, and by doing so, they've developed personal relationships and bonds that will last a lifetime.
Cuando viene cualquier persona del extranjero, pues lo recibimos con mucho amor, recibimos con mucho aprecio, con mucho afecto, porque sabiendo que si esta persona vive tan lejos, no nos conoce y nos viene a visitar, eso para nosotros es muy satisfactorio y toca mi corazón de una manera especial.
Brad Charles is one of the leaders behind Cubit and their work in Canaan, Colombia. His passion is for helping people in need around the world and doing God's work out here on the mission field. The Cubit Foundation has done some incredible work here thus far, and God's presence is truly evident. Through partnerships with local Colombian churches, Cubit has taken part in service to the village of Canaan. And with your help, Cubit will continue to serve them and many more around the world.
When people give to Cubit, I want them to go. I want them to go with me. And I want them to experience this.
Lo imposible para el hombre es posible para Dios.
To find out more and to become a part of what Cubit is doing here in Colombia, log on to cubitfoundation.org. That's cubitfoundation.org.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ron Charles of the Cubit Foundation. You know, we've been in Middle East for going on 30 years. And I would love to come to your church or your meeting to let you know what's happening in reality in the Middle East. And we'd love to come there and let you know what's happening, what the Lord's doing in that part of the world. So if you can contact us at thecubitfoundation.org, then we could come to your place. And if you would like to find out more about us, then go to www.cubitfoundation.org. Thank you.